Welcome in, everybody, for this deep dive. It's Nosferatu this time. And we are going deep, like really deep. We've got F.W. Murnau's own annotated script for this one.
Oh, wow.
So we're not just like watching the movie, we are like in Murnau's head with this.
It's like peeking right over his shoulder as he's making this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So many insights in here. It's a treasure trove.
I bet.
Yeah, and right away, like scene one, Murnau is setting up this really vivid picture of Wismar. The town where it all begins. He describes it as pointed gables and leafy squares. Everything's like sun-drenched. Do you think there's something almost too perfect about it, though?
Oh, yeah. Totally. I think it's intentional, setting up this stark contrast to what's coming later, right? And you have to remember the context, too, This film, it was made just a few years after World War I in Germany. So there's all this collective trauma, the losses, the societal upheaval. I think all that is kind of bubbling under the surface, even in the seemingly perfect image of Wismar.
Right, like it's all going to come crashing down.
Exactly.
Yeah, and Nosferatu is the one who's going to bring it down.
He is.
But before we even get to him, I'm fascinated by Ellen and Hutter. The young couple. Like, there's a real tension there between them. Right from the start.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. You can sense it right away. The way Ellen is portrayed, she's so innocent, childlike almost. Like in scene 3, she's playing with a kitten by the window, oblivious to, the darkness that's heading her way.
Yeah.
And Hutter, well, he's devoted to her, obviously. But there's this possessiveness, too, this desire to control her.
Oh,
it's like he wants to keep her locked away in that perfect little world of Wismar, protected from the real world.
Right, and it's like when he brings her the flowers, the cut flowers.
Oh, right.
She gets upset. He killed them.
Yeah. Such a small detail. But it says so much about them, doesn't it?
Totally. I think it's like foreshadowing, too.
Oh, for sure. Hinting at what's to come for Ellen. And there's Knock, of course.
Oh, Knock.
He embodies a whole different kind of unease, doesn't he?
Yeah. Just reading his description in the script is creepy. Like, he's spindly, hunchback, this weird tick around his mouth, and his eyes, they just burn with this, like, somber fire.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's chilling. And then there's that line about a few drops of sweat and blood, like he's obsessed with it, perhaps a little blood. It's just so creepy right away. Knock is bad news.
Yeah, he's a bad guy.
But what's interesting is Murnau doesn't just make him physically grotesque. He gives him epilepsy and these bizarre eccentricities, too. It's like he's tapping into this societal fear of mental illness, which wasn't really understood back then.
Right.
So even before Nosferatu shows up, there's already this feeling that something's not right,
Yeah, like a creeping dread.
Exactly.
And then Hutter sets off on his journey to Transylvania. And that's when the tension really starts to build.
Oh, yeah. The journey itself, it's brilliant how Murnau uses it to create suspense. Right? At first, it's almost lighthearted. But as Hutter gets deeper into the Carpathian Mountains, the landscape changes. It's more desolate. The people he meets are strange, unsettling.
It's like he's leaving the real world behind.
Yeah, exactly. And by the time he gets to that inn, it's clear he's crossed over into somewhere else. Someplace where the normal rules don't apply.
Right, like a nightmare.
Yeah. And all the warnings from the locals about the wolves, the book on vampires he finds, it all just adds the feeling that something bad is going to happen.
For sure. And then finally, we get to Count Orlok, or Nosferatu as we know him.
Yeah.
The script describes him as this pale, ghostly creature with holler eyes and a thin mouth.
Yeah.
So different from the, suave Dracula we might think.
Right. It's much more monstrous, this creature.
Yeah. And the way Murnau describes his movements, he's always quick as lightning or jerky, like almost like a puppet or a spider.
It's really deliberate the way he moves. It emphasizes how inhuman he is.
Right. And then there's that line when he sees Ellen's portrait. And he says, what a beautiful throat your wife has.
Chilling. But it's not just physical threat with Nosferatu, is it? There's this hint of something more, this power he has.
Oh, yeah.
Like he can control minds, influence people from afar.
Right, like in scene 42, when Hutter seems hypnotized by his gaze.
Exactly, and then those 2 red spots on Hutter's neck.
Yeah.
It's obviously the vampire bite. But it's also symbolic, isn't it? Like this invisible infection.
Right.
This dread that's slowly taking over.
Like a disease spreading silently.
And speaking of disease, we can't forget about the plague.
Oh, right. That adds a whole other level of terror to the story.
It does. And it's not just a random plot device either,
Sure.
This was made just a few years after the Spanish flu pandemic. Millions had died.
Yeah.
The fear of disease, of these invisible threats, it was very real. So Murnau is tapping into that collective trauma, using the plague as this parallel to Nosferatu's own spread of darkness.
Right. Like what's happening to individuals in the story is also happening to society as a whole.
Exactly. And it's not just the physical disease either. It's the fear, the paranoia, the way it isolates people, turns them against each other.
Oh, yeah.
Like in scene 92, Knock, he's locked up in the asylum now, but he's reading a newspaper about the plague spreading through Transylvania and the Black Sea ports, and he's gleeful about it.
Oh, wow.
It's like he sees it as proof that his twisted worldview is right. And that line he says, blood is life, blood is life. It's disturbing, but it's also revealing. It's like he's obsessed with this dark side of humanity,
Yeah. It's fascinating how Murnau uses Knock to explore these themes.
Yeah.
Especially because he's not a vampire like Nosferatu. He's human, but he seems to embrace the darkness almost.
Yeah, he represents this corruption that's already present within society, the susceptibility to fear and superstition that allows someone like Nosferatu to thrive.
Right. But then Ellen, she starts out as the most innocent character, and she becomes the one who confronts the darkness.
Exactly. She's no damsel in distress.
Yeah.
She's the one who reads the book on vampires, the one who figures out how to defeat Nosferatu. And ultimately, she's the one who makes the choice to sacrifice herself, to save everyone else.
Right. And that sleepwalking scene, she has that premonition of danger, and then later, she cries out, "I must go home. He is coming."
Yeah, like she knows what's going to happen.
Yeah. But before we get to all that, let's talk about those deleted scenes.
Oh, yes.
There's so many notes throughout the script about scenes that were filmed, but then cut from the final movie.
It's fascinating, like getting a glimpse behind the scenes, seeing what could have been.
Right. Like in one deleted scene, Hutter actually threatens Knock with violence.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Like a much more aggressive side of him
Yeah.
that we don't see in the final film.
I wonder why Murnau cut it.
Me too. Maybe he thought it made Hutter too unsympathetic, or maybe it took the focus away from Nosferatu.
It's a puzzle, trying to figure out his intentions.
Right. But speaking of Murnau's intentions, we have to talk about the symbolism.
Oh, yes. He's a master of it.
Yeah, he doesn't just tell a story. He creates this whole world of meaning through images and metaphors.
Absolutely. We've talked about the rats and the plague, but there are the wolves, too. The spiders and carnivorous plants in Nosferatu's castle, even the number 7, it keeps appearing.
Oh, wow.
It all adds to this feeling that the world is full of these ancient fears and superstitions.
Right, like he's drawing on something primal, something that's been with us for centuries.
Exactly. But before we get too lost in the symbolism, I think we need to move on to the next part of the story.
Okay, let's do it. Nosferatu's on his way, the plague is spreading, and Ellen's starting to realize the true nature of the threat.
It's about to get real.
Yeah.
So Nosferatu, he's on that ship headed for Wismar Right, coffins full of that infected soil. And the town, they have no idea what's coming.
It's like a ticking time bomb.
Yeah. And the way Murnau describes his arrival, it's chilling. In scene 74, the ship pulls into port, and it's covered in this shroud of mist.
Oh.
It's like this darkness is literally rolling in.
Yeah.
And he even has a note in the script about wanting the ship to look ghostly, like it's not even from this world.
I love that.
And then the rats, of course, they start pouring out of the coffins, swarming all over the docks. Can you imagine seeing that, like right after the Spanish flu?
Oh, yeah, it would be terrible.
It's this visceral reminder of how powerful the plague is. And it connects Nosferatu directly to that real-world threat.
Right.
But it's interesting, too, how Murnau uses the plague to show the dark side of human nature. Like,
oh, yeah, like how the townspeople start turning on each other.
Exactly. Fear and suspicion just take over. Like in scene 131, there's this guy going from house to house, marking the doors of infected people with white crosses.
Oh, gosh.
It's such a powerful image. Isolation, fear. And it's exactly what happens in a crisis, isn't it?
Yeah, people retreat into themselves. They stop trusting their neighbors. It's like the plague is breaking down society.
Exactly. It creates this vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that's where Ellen comes in. She's the one who understands this threat.
Right. She's read the book.
Yeah. In scene 141, she has this moment of realization. She's reading that passage about how to destroy a vampire.
It's a classic trope, but it works so well here.
Yeah. And it's more than just a plot device. It's like Ellen is taking control. She's finding a way to fight back.
Yeah. Using knowledge as a weapon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it comes at a cost. She realizes that to defeat Nosferatu, she has to sacrifice herself.
To distract him until dawn.
It's really powerful.
Yeah.
The role of women in these horror films, They're often the victims,
Mm.
but they can also be the heroes, the ones who stand up to the monsters.
And Ellen. She's both.
Yeah. She chooses to give her life, to save the town, to protect the people she loves.
It's tragic, but also incredibly heroic.
It is. It's about love and selflessness in the face of pure horror.
Yeah. But it also makes you think about good and evil. Like Nosferatu, he's clearly a monster, but he's also a victim of his own nature.
Right.
You can't control this thirst for blood.
Right. It makes you wonder, is he really evil or just trapped by his instincts?
Yeah. It's a question that still resonates today, doesn't it?
For sure. Are monsters born or made, and can they ever be redeemed?
Heavy stuff. But I think we got to talk about the ending.
Oh, yeah. The climax.
It's iconic. I mean, the way Murnau uses light and shadow to show Nosferatu's demise, it's breathtaking.
It's visual storytelling at its finest. In scene 176, the sun rises, and the light falls on Nosferatu, and he just starts writhing in agony.
Yeah.
It's such a symbolic victory, like light over darkness, reason over superstition.
Well, it shows how brilliant Murnau was as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
You know, he was a master of German expressionism.
Oh, yeah. He used those distorted images, the exaggerated sets, the stark contrasts of light and shadow to create this whole mood.
Right. And in Nosferatu, he uses it to create a world that's both beautiful and terrifying.
Exactly. He turns shadows into living things, uses light to reveal the hidden depths of human nature.
And he plays with our perception of reality, too. Like,
oh, yeah. There are times when you're not even sure what's real and what's just Hutter's imagination.
right. Like in scene 67, when Hutter sees Nosferatu loading the coffins onto the carriage.
Oh, yeah.
Murnau's note in the script says, is it a shadow? A ghost Nosferatu? He wants us to question what we're seeing.
It's brilliant. And it's a technique that's still used in horror films today, right? Keep the audience guessing.
Yeah. But even though Nosferatu is destroyed, the ending isn't totally happy, is it?
No. There's this lingering sadness. Ellen is dead. You know, her sacrifice. It cost her everything.
Right.
And not the last we see of him, he's muttering, the master is dead.
Oh, wow.
Utterly lost and alone. It's like a reminder that even when evil is defeated, there are consequences.
Scars left behind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it brings us back to that question about Nosferatu. Is he really evil or just a creature acting out his nature, his death? It brings relief. But there's also this pity.
Yeah. You almost feel sorry for him.
And that's what makes the film so powerful. It's not just a monster movie. It's about the complexities of human nature.
The shadows inside us all.
Right. This annotated script, it's given us so much to think about.
I know. It's been a real deep dive.
It has. So what do you think is the most important takeaway for our listener? What should they keep in mind when they watch Nosferatu?
That's a good question.
I think it's important to remember that this film, it's a product of its time. You know, it reflects the anxieties and uncertainties of post-war Germany,
Right.
the plague, the fear of the unknown, that fragile sense of normalcy. These were real concerns for people back then.
Murnau. He uses the vampire myth to explore those themes.
Exactly, to tap into those primal fears that are always lurking beneath the surface of society.
So as you watch, pay attention to the historical context.
Yeah, the visual symbolism, the nuances of the characters Nosferatu, it rewards close attention, this film. It's a classic for a reason.
It is. But I have one last question. We've talked about the rats, the plague, the number 7. What about the wolves?
Oh, the wolves.
They're there throughout the script, but their role, it's not as clear.
That is a good question. It makes us think even harder about the symbolism, I think.
Right.
The wolves, they're interesting because they're not directly connected to the vampire or the plague. They're more like a force of nature.
Yeah, wild, untamed.
Existing on the fringes of human civilization.
Something primal.
Right. Something that can't be controlled. And their presence, it adds to the unease of the film.
Yeah, like something is lurking just beyond our sight.
Exactly. The unknown, the forces that are beyond our understanding. And in a way, they're even scarier than Nosferatu himself.
Because you can't predict them.
Right. They're a reminder that even in a world full of plague and terror, there are still things out there that we can't fully grasp.
So the wolves are like this wild card, a symbol of chaos and uncertainty.
Exactly. A brilliant touch by Murnau. It adds another layer to the film.
It really does. I mean, this annotated script, it's been such a key to unlocking the film.
It has. And for our listener, this is just the beginning. Now it's your turn to explore. Watch the film with fresh eyes. See what secrets you can uncover.
Pay attention to those wolves.
Yeah. See what they reveal to you about fear, about the power of the unknown.
It's amazing how just one little detail, like, can completely change how you see the whole film.
Right, and we've only just scratched the surface here, you know?
Yeah.
There's so much more to uncover.
I know. It's what makes these deep dives so fun.
Right. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Like, you're having this conversation with Murnau himself, you know, hearing his thoughts as he's making the film.
Yeah. And speaking of making the film, we haven't really talked about the technical side of things, the brilliance of silent film.
Right.
We've been so focused on the story and the symbolism. But Murnau was working with a lot of limitations. You know?
Yeah.
No dialogue, no sound effects, just visuals and the music.
Yeah. And yet, he still manages to create this incredible experience. So immersive and powerful emotionally. Like that scene when Nosferatu first enters Hutter's bedroom.
Oh, yeah.
The way he moves, so slow, deliberate like a predator.
Yeah. The script says he's a shadowy figure gliding across the wall.
Yeah.
It's so simple, but so terrifying.
Right. And Murnau even has a note about using stop motion.
Oh, wow.
To make his movements even more unnatural.
That's so cool, like early special effects.
Yeah, but used with such artistry. It's not about showing off, it's about enhancing the mood.
Right, like making it even creepier.
Exactly, and it shows how creative these filmmakers had to be, you know? They had limited resources, but they still achieved incredible things.
Yeah, it's a good lesson for filmmakers today, I think.
Oh, for sure. Sometimes the simplest techniques are the most effective.
Right.
It's about understanding the power of an image.
Yeah.
A well-timed cut. The lighting.
And in Nosferatu, I think the fact that there's no sound, it actually makes it scarier.
Yeah.
It makes you pay attention to the visuals.
There's movements and expression.
Like your imagination fills in the blanks.
Exactly. And you end up creating this soundscape in your head that's even scarier than anything Murnau could have put on the soundtrack.
That's so true. And it brings us back to the wolves. Remember how we said they represent the unknown?
Oh, yeah.
Well, in silent film, that sense of the unknown, it's even stronger. Right? We have to imagine what those wolves sound like, how they move.
It's like Murnau is making us part of the storytelling.
Right. We're not just watching. We're creating the horror ourselves.
Exactly. And that's why Nosferatu is still so powerful. It speaks to those primal fears.
The fear of the dark.
The unknown.
Right. All those things that go bump in the night.
And it does it with such skill. I mean, the way Murnau blends folklore and history and cinematic technique, it's just brilliant.
It is. He was a master.
Yeah.
So as you watch Nosferatu, remember, you're not just watching a movie. You're stepping into this world that Murnau created.
Right. A world where shadows come to life.
Keep your eyes open, your ears attuned, and your imagination ready.
And who knows? Maybe you'll start seeing the world a little differently, noticing those shadows lurking everywhere.
It's the power of storytelling.
It really is. This deep dive has been amazing.
It has.
I feel like I understand Nosferatu so much better now. And silent film, too.
I'm glad to hear it. It's incredible what we can learn from just one annotated script.
I know. And I hope our listeners feel the same way.
We've given you the tools. Now it's your turn to experience Nosferatu.
Happy viewing and happy deep diving.